Most Australians approaching retirement are guessing. They pick a number, maybe $500,000, maybe $800,000, and they hope it's enough. But here's what the research actually shows. The number most people think they need, and the number they actually need, are almost never the same. And the gap between those two figures can determine whether you retire comfortably or whether you quietly run out of money in your mid-70s. So today, we're going to answer the question properly, not with a vague range, not with a generic rule of thumb, with the actual framework that financial planners use, and the three variables that change everything. Let's start with what most people hear first. You've probably come across the ASFA Retirement Standard. It's the most widely quoted benchmark in Australia for how much you need in retirement. ASFA, the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, publishes figures every quarter showing what a comfortable retirement actually costs. For a single person, a comfortable retirement currently requires around $51,000 per year. For a couple, it's around $72,000 per year. These figures assume you own your home outright, are relatively healthy, and want to enjoy a reasonable quality of life. Not luxury, but not deprivation either. Things like private health insurance, annual holidays, dining out occasionally, and running a car. Now here's where the maths gets interesting. If you retire at 67 and you live to 87, which is close to the average life expectancy for an AN Australian today, that's 20 years of retirement. At $51,000 a year for a single person, that's over $1 million in total spending across your retirement. But you won't need $1 million in super because of something most people forget to account for: the age pension. The age pension is one of the most underestimated assets in the Australian retirement system, and yet most people either assume they won't qualify for it, or they assume they'll get the full amount, when the reality is usually somewhere in between. And the rules that determine exactly what you receive are more nuanced than almost anyone realizes. Here's the critical point. If you have $500,000 in super as a single homeowner, you will likely still qualify for a partial age pension. The assets test threshold for a single homeowner to receive even a partial pension sits above $600,000, which means if your super balance is below that figure, you're probably entitled to some government support. And that support reduces how hard your super has to work. A partial pension of even $400 or $500 per fortnight changes your retirement income picture significantly. Over 20 years, that's potentially $200,000 or more in government payments supplementing your super. People who don't factor this in systematically overestimate how much super they need, and spend years of their working life anxiously chasing a number that was already higher than necessary. But here's the thing, most people don't realize about the age pension and your super working together. The way your super is drawn down interacts directly with your pension entitlement in a way that can either work for you or against you, depending entirely on how you structure your withdrawals. This is called the sequencing effect of retirement income, and it's one of the most powerful concepts in retirement planning that almost no one outside of a financial planner's office ever hears about. Here's how it works. In the early years of retirement, if you draw your super down more quickly, taking larger lump sums or higher income payments, your super balance falls faster. As your balance falls, your assets test position improves. And as your assets test position improves, your age pension entitlement increases. Gradually, the government starts contributing more to your retirement income as your super contributes less. Done correctly, this means your total income in retirement, super plus pension, can remain relatively stable even as your super balance declines. You're not running out of money. You're transitioning from one income source to another in a way the system is actually designed to support. Done incorrectly, by drawing your super down too slowly, or by keeping large amounts in accumulation phase beyond preservation age, you can stay above the assets test threshold for years longer than necessary, miss out on pension entitlements you were legally entitled to, and end up with a lower overall income than someone with a smaller super balance who planned more carefully. Let that sink in for a moment. In some scenarios, having more super and managing it poorly can leave you worse off than having less super and managing it well. Now let's talk about the variable that almost every retirement calculator ignores entirely: your actual spending pattern in retirement. Most retirement projections assume a flat spending line. You need $51,000 a year in year 1 and $51,000 a year in year 20. But that's not how people actually spend in retirement. Research consistently shows a very different pattern, one that retirement planners call the retirement spending smile. In the early years of retirement, your 60s and early 70s, spending tends to be higher. You're active, you're traveling, you're doing the things you've been planning for decades. This is the go-go phase of retirement. Then, in the mid-retirement years, roughly your mid-70s, spending naturally starts to slow down. Fewer holidays, less dining out, less physical activity. This is the slow-go phase. And in the later years, your 80s and beyond, spending often drops significantly, aside from healthcare and aged care costs. This is the no-go phase. The implication of this pattern is significant. If your retirement projection assumes flat spending, it will almost certainly overestimate how much you need in total, because real spending in the slow-go and no-go phases tends to be meaningfully lower than peak early retirement spending. However, and this is the critical caveat, aged care and healthcare costs can spike sharply in those later years, in ways that a simple flatline projection doesn't capture at all. So let's put this together with a realistic example. Consider a couple. We'll call them Robert and Susan. Both are 63. They have a combined super balance of $720,000. They own their home outright in regional New South Wales. They want to retire at 65 and have a comfortable, active early retirement. Based on a simple calculation, $72,000 a year for 25 years, they'd appear to need $1.8 million. That number terrifies them. They feel like they've failed, like they'll never be able to retire properly. But when you apply the actual framework, the picture changes completely. In the early years of their retirement, ages 65 to 75, they plan to spend around $75,000 per year. That's the go-go phase. Active, traveling, living well. At this stage, their combined assets sit above the assets test threshold, so they receive no age pension. Their super is doing the heavy lifting. But by the time they reach their mid-70s, their super balance has naturally drawn down to a level where they start qualifying for a partial age pension. By their late 70s, the combined income from a reduced super drawdown and an increasing pension entitlement keeps their total income comfortably above $60,000 a year. Their spending in the slow-go phase, mid-70s to mid-80s, has naturally reduced to title, around $55,000 to $60,000 anyway. The income matches the lifestyle. And in their 80s, while healthcare costs increase, the full age pension plus whatever remains of their super provides a meaningful safety net. Robert and Susan don't need $1, $8 million. They need a plan, and the difference between those two things is enormous. So what does this mean practically for you? The first thing to understand is that there is no single number that applies to everyone. The how much do I need question cannot be answered without knowing four things: your expected retirement age, your likely spending pattern in each phase of retirement, your home ownership status, and your eligibility for the age pension under both the assets test and the income test. The second thing to understand is that the interaction between your super and the age pension is not automatic. It requires deliberate sequencing of your withdrawals, which pension account to draw from, first, how much to draw, and when. Getting this wrong can cost you tens of thousands of dollars in missed pension entitlements over a retirement that might last 25 or 30 years. The third, and perhaps the most important thing to understand, is that a retirement plan is not a retirement balance. Having $700,000 in super with a clear strategy will almost always outperform having $900,000 in super with no strategy at all. The number in your super account is only one part of the equation. Here's what you should actually do with this information. Start by looking up the current ASFA Retirement Standard figures. They re-updated quarterly and freely available. Estimate which category fits your lifestyle, modest or comfortable. Then look at the current age pension assets test thresholds on the Services Australia website. These are indexed and change regularly, so use the current figures, not the ones from a few years ago. Then ask yourself honestly, do you own your home? Because the assets test treats homeowners and non-homeowners very differently, and if you're renting in retirement, the income you need and the super balance required to support it is significantly higher than most published benchmarks suggest. If you can, speak to a financial planner who specializes in retirement income strategies, not just accumulation. There are planners who focus specifically on the drawdown phase, and the difference between their advice and general investment advice is significant. And if you want to do a rough check on your own position right now, the Money Smart Retirement Planner, run by ASIC, is one of the best free tools available. It allows you to input your age, your current balance, your expected contributions, and your desired income, and it models your likely retirement outcome, including age pension entitlements. The question, how much super do I need, is one of the most searched retirement questions in Australia, and yet the answers most people find are either too simple, too scary, or completely ignore the way the Australian system actually works. The truth is this: for most Australians who own their home, have a super balance anywhere between $400,000 and $800,000, and are willing to structure their retirement income thoughtfully, a comfortable retirement is genuinely achievable, not because the numbers are small, but because the system, super, the age pension, tax-free retirement income, was designed to work together. The people who struggle in retirement are almost never the ones who didn't save enough. They're the ones who didn't understand how the pieces fit together. Now you do. If this raised questions about your own retirement situation, put them in the comments below. And if you want to make sure you see the next video covering exactly how to structure your super withdrawals in retirement to maximize your age pension entitlement, make sure you saw your time and resubscribed. Your retirement deserves a compass, not guesswork.